it was the unacceptance of my own athletes inside sport that I held so high was the most depressing and most discouraging moment in sport that I ever experienced.
Hey, welcome back to the 178th episode of the Athletes Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. That's brought to you by Rooted. You can see these three here. We have our women's, men's, and our prenatal options. You folks have seen them here for the past 25 episodes. They've been sponsoring the show. And that's because they provide us with energy, hydration, digestive support, immune support, cell support, eye health, you name it. This product has it in it. One of the best parts was chatting with Phoenix and I's moms over the weekend and learning about the fact that, hey, instead of taking 20 different pills, supplements, just take one in the morning with your breakfast and you're set for the day. It's amazing. I love it. Try Rooted. Use the code AP20 to get 20% off. So now, the Athletes Podcast, where we bring you the most compelling stories from the world of sports, specifically those incredible athletes that are on the field performing day to day, in and out, like you as an athlete. You are watching this show. We appreciate your support. This is the 178th episode. We're going to delve into the remarkable journey of a multi-sport Paralympian who has broken barriers, shattered records, and inspired millions along the way. His name is Chris Daw. When it comes to resilience, determination, and unparalleled success in the face of adversity, no one exemplifies this better than Chris. With a staggering total of over 1,000 medals for Canada, 125 national championships, 64 world championships, and participation in 4 Paralympic Games, as well as 1 Olympic Games. Chris's contributions to Canadian sports and the Paralympic movement have been nothing short of extraordinary. One moment that particularly stands out to Chris, which you'll hear in this episode, is his shot against Norway in the semifinals, a testament to his competitiveness and his will to win. But Chris's story isn't just about athletic prowess. It's about the power of sport, teamwork, and national pride. Chris's journey has personally resonated with me as it beautifully encapsulates the potential within each of us to defy odds and achieve greatness. Fear not, who dares, wins. This to me encapsulates the spirit of Chris's journey, and indeed the essence of sportsmanship. The lessons from his career extend beyond the realm of sports, reminding us of the potential within each and every one of us to overcome adversity and pursue our dreams relentlessly. Chris Daw's story is a beacon of inspiration, proof that no obstacle is insurmountable when we believe in ourselves and our ability to overcome. As we continue to bring you such inspiring stories, we invite you to join us on this exciting journey. Subscribe to the Athletes Podcast wherever you're consuming this content right now. Do me a favor, hit that like button before this episode starts. Drop your name, where you're listening from, in the comments, and I'll buy one of you YouTube Premium for an entire year, okay? As crazy as that sounds, all you got to do, put your name, where you're listening from down below, and we'll buy you YouTube Premium for 1 year, one person. Comments below, runs for 1 week as this episode goes live. It's the 178th episode of the Athletes Podcast. Here we go. It's crazy because having seen it all, and the passion obviously is still there for you. I mean, I want to continue on this topic because I think you introduced new technology to a sport and then they dropped it. How does that happen when you're still, I guess that was part of probably what happened in 2010, but how do they see a downgrade in performance and not think, oh, it's worthwhile grabbing that?
Well, the answer is that they didn't see a downgrade in performance. They saw a upgrade in athlete knowledge versus the technology. So you get what's called a false positive in sport, right? It's where an athlete is so dominant in their knowledge and their understanding of the game that it changes the game. And it takes it away from the athlete and puts it on a single entity that could just outplay anybody. And I mean, good on him. I mean, and yay, he was Canadian. I mean, you got to give it to him. But at the end of the day, if it would be like putting, I don't know, Michael Jordan out there today with some of the athletes, right? Would Jordan still perform? 100%. Would it be a closer competition? 100%, but MJ would still kick their butt, right? Like MJ's that oddity, and we see that in regards to another great athlete that's out there, and that's Pat Anderson, who's considered the Michael Jordan of wheelchair basketball, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was just watching a game with Pat in Ottawa, and Pat went to a short chair. And when you take a look at that, why would somebody that's so much taller and so diverse, like you couldn't even compete with Pat if you wanted, go to a shorter chair? Well, that's to make it more competitive for him, right? So now he's more at an equal playing field with everybody else. So then that's like a pro athlete going, okay, I'm getting older, I'm doing this, and I am so much better than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
How do I challenge myself? So that's what he did. And I mean, that's awesome for him.
Yeah, that's unheard of, to have someone who's dominating in a sport and say, hey, give me more of a disadvantage, and like realistically level the playing field so I'm competing against everyone in the same way. Chris Daw, I want to thank you for coming on the Athletes Podcast. I have to do a bit of an intro here because your experience resume is lengthy, but I'm going to do my best here, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of these stats. 125 national championships, 64 world championships, 4 Paralympics, 1 Olympic Games, thousands, I should say, an estimated total of over 1,000 medals for Canada, including a dozen world championships, 19 world records, and Paralympic gold medal performances. Arguably Canada's most decorated athlete to have ever stepped onto a pitch. I want to thank you for your time, Chris. I want to also let you share a bit of your insight, because over the past 30 minutes we've been chatting before we started recording, and you have an insane passion for sport. You've been around, like you said, before the Paralympic Games even begun as a trial. When I list off those stats, how does that make you feel, knowing what you've accomplished over the past 4 decades, 5 decades?
Old. really old and achy, really achy. My shoulders are just killing me when you read that.
Is that like wheelchair hits though, like over the years adding up?
You could say that I was a little bit nuts in my former athletic career. I mean, there's stuff that we did that you can get away with now. So it was definitely a little different. So
Strathroy, Ontario.
Yep.
Born in North York.
Yep.
What brought you out to Victoria?
What brought me out to Victoria? Well, when my athletic career ended, I had a huge opportunity to come out here and be the general manager of the Vancouver Curling Club. Subsequent to that, I was given the project of transition of the Olympic building, now known as the Hillcrest Community Center, to transition that from Olympic mode to community mode. And then I moved back to Ontario for a little bit, and then came out here. My daughter was born here in Maple Ridge, and I really don't like snow anymore. So there's like no snow out here. The views are great. Yeah, it's expensive, and yeah, life can be a challenge, but you can't, the views here will tell you exactly why we're here.
We picked out the Sea Cidery here in Victoria here specifically because of a couple recommendations, but also to show off the incredible background that you have, the environment that you've chosen here to live. You won gold in your games debut in Stoke Mandeville, England, 1984. I think that date's correct.
Actually, it goes back a little bit back.
Okay, let's start it. Let's have you share it.
So when I was really, really young, I was fortunate enough to have a parent, both my parents who are now deceased, unfortunately, believe that I wasn't disabled. And that story is a little bit different. They don't know what's wrong with me. I've never been officially diagnosed in my entire life, and I'm probably the only athlete that can compete in paraplegic and quadriplegic sports. Hence why I can go into like wheelchair rugby, which is specifically a quadriplegic sport. So my dad wanted me to just be a normal kid. and my mom believed in me. So I started in basketball in London, Ontario. And I was really, really a sparky, fast kid on the court. Couldn't shoot worth the life of me. I tried really hard, but I wasn't the biggest kid when I was younger. So at that time, a great guy, now gone unfortunately, is Keith Cartwright, said, "You know what? Maybe this isn't the time for this sport." So he said, "Why don't we put you in touch with track?" And my first games was actually in '82 in Meaford, Ontario, way up by Penetanguishene and whatnot. And just before the games were supposed to occur, the track got flooded out. So it was like 4 inches of water on the track. So they said, "Okay, we're just going to put it on the road." So they measured out 400 meters on the road, and you did your sport. 100 meters, 400 meters. If you're doing 15, you got to the 400, you turned around, you sprinted back. You know, you did that back and forth. And I was lucky. I won every race then, and I was hooked on it, and then was fortunate enough to start getting picked up for Team Ontario, Team Canada.
Yeah, you're being humble. Wheelchair racing, wheelchair rugby, wheelchair curling. You also competed in volleyball, basketball, hockey, parachuting, rock climbing, badminton. You also hold high-level black belts in Dairyu Jiu-Jitsu. Is that correct?
It's Dato-Ryu Aki Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been studying since I came out of the womb. So, yeah. No, I'm a diverse athlete. The biggest thing is that at an Olympic or Paralympic game, I never was able to win that ultimate gold. And with that, I was hunting for the right sport. And at the time, I was like, oh God, racing, it's too tough on the shoulders. I'm going to go have fun, and played basketball. And then the year that I thought I was going to be on the men's basketball team, the wheelchair rugby team said, "Oh God, this guy is pretty big and he's pretty fast. Can we borrow him?" And I was like, okay, I'll go do that. And the men's basketball team ended up winning gold, and I got fourth. And I was like, what next? And then I found a sport and this is a true story, that I loved, and that's curling. And I threw my first curling rock off the top of a case of Moosehead beer in the Guelph Curling Club. And I said, anytime that I can drink beer and throw rocks at houses and get away with it, I'm hooked. And the rest is kind of history from there.
Wow, I had absolutely no idea. I want to read a quote that I've heard was one of your favorites. "Never let your passion outweigh your patience. Work hard, stay true, stand up for yourself, and never get up. It will happen."
Yep. That's me at a much younger age. Nowadays, I use part of that.
Okay.
And part of that is never let your passion outweigh your patience. In sports, one of the biggest thing an athlete can do, and I can testify to this, is absolutely have the passion for the sport, but not have the passion and patience to perform. And that would often get the better of me. The bigger phrase that I have, and I have it tattooed on my arm actually, is what I believe in. It says, "Fear not the game, I see clearly." And a lot of people go, "Oh, what a great sport motto," right? It's got nothing to do with sport. It's fear not. That's been my motto. That's actually my family motto. That's what Daw means. And the game is about the game of life. And I've never let life get in my way. So I've always had some sort of plan. I'm not going to say it's always been not musty a little bit or a little bit blurred, but yeah, I've always had some sort of plan of where I'm going, and I've always been up for that next adventure. That's why I've been fortunate enough to be on 6 or 7 continents. Antarctica won't have me. They've just blocked me out of there. And the Penguins do not want to compete against me. And then subsequently to that, all the sports. I mean, I've been lucky enough to, a lot of people say I've pioneered some of the wheelchair sports in what I did. And I mean, you see on all these mimes and everything now on TikTok and that, you know, guys in wheelchairs doing push-ups with the wheelchair upside down. Well, I was doing that 25, 30 years ago, right? And now they just, you know, they get the notoriety of it and some of the crazy things that we used to do. You know, another great guy that I know, massive man, a guy named Jacques Martin out of Quebec. He was one of Canada's best field, I want to say players, members, right? And Jacques would always get in fistfights everywhere we would go. And I remember in Puerto Rico, Jacques getting in a fistfight. And I was like some little young kid, and he goes, dude, you want to back me up here? So I ended up in a fist fight with Jacques because I didn't want to let my teammate down. And sure enough, these two guys in wheelchairs just beat the crap out of like 20 people in this bar. And the guy who owned the bar is like, okay, you guys drink for free. And it's like, I don't want to go to jail any more than what I am, man. So yeah, there's some great stories, and you know, there's some great heartbreaks that are out there too.
Is there anything that sticks out? Because I feel like I could ask you between the years of 82 to 2000, and there's probably some tremendous memories, 06 in Torino. Like, anything stand out to you specifically that you want to shine light on and share maybe stories in particular? I know you share like rugby finishing 4th, Canada winning gold for basketball. That's one example. But like, are there specific moments in your career that you looked at as either pivotal? Or I think back, I'm like, if I was in your position and actually not knowing, to your point, what's wrong or why I'm disabled, I'm like, how do I create this plan? Like, I'm thinking as if I'm a young kid listening to this podcast, 10, 12, 13, 14 years old, and I'm trying to figure out my way, build a plan for my life, see what I can do, have all these aspirations. What are those things that you did back in your early years that set you up for success? Because obviously you were able to basically climb every mountain put in front of you. Were there specific mindsets that you did? Was that taught from your parents?
So when I was born, I wasn't supposed to live. That's what the doctor said. This is back in the early 70s. And my parents were told, you know, we don't know what's wrong with him. You know, he doesn't meet anything that we're aware of. And my dad, hilarious man, great man. He walked in the hospital when I was about 5, and I was having another operation, and he looked at me and he turned to the doctor and he said, okay, he's done. I've had enough of this. Do you know what's wrong with him? No, we got to do more tests. Well, you're costing me money. I think I'm going to take him home. And that's part of where I get my dark humor from, right? Is he didn't mean anything bad about it. It's just my dad and my mom at that point in time just said, you know, we're going to stop treating this kid like he's got something wrong with him and just treat him like a kid. And I went to a school. I think most of my youth is where my tenacity and my flexibility in life is. I went to a public school when the public school wanted to try and push me to the special school, right? And my mom said, why? He's not disabled. Well, he's clearly in a wheelchair. Well, what's his disability? We don't know. Then he's not disabled. You got to let him go to school. And I went to high school, the old Strathroy District Collegiate High School, which was like 7 floors, right? And how'd I get around in a wheelchair? There's no elevator when I went to school. So I simply bumped up and down the stairs, and I used to scare the absolute crap out of the teachers until like my second year of high school, when I went down these stairs, went bum, 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 bum. And the teacher stuck his head out and went, "Oh, it's only Chris. Okay, let's move on," right? So what was non-conform, which you'd probably be arrested for now, became normality. So somewhere along the lines, we changed the circle of disability acceptance from being blind to notoriety, right? You're disabled, you're in a wheelchair, right? And now we see these cycles of disability awareness that begin to encroach in society again. I mean, I had an argument with somebody about 4 weeks ago about what a curb cut was for, and he thought it was so his bike could go up and down the curbs better. It's like, no, man, that's for people in chairs and that. Well, what's automatic doors for? So you can get your groceries out. No, again, you're wrong. And don't even get me started on the parking thing, right? Because understanding the rules of accessible parking, it's insane. Like, nobody knows the rules, and there's such abuse of that particular system that system itself needs totally remodeled.
I can't help but think about a guest who we had on about a month ago, Chris Cook, who holds the same name as you, obviously, but who's also got similar disabilities in the sense where he has no limbs, and he's faced this challenge his whole life. You've obviously faced this. I'm looking at, like, sometimes the most incredible people, athletes, high performers in life, are the ones that are faced with the most adversity when they're youngest. Would you agree with that statement?
I think there's a testament to it. Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things to deal with, whether you're disabled or an able-bodied person, is to understand that you're dealing with that person. You have to take them as an individual. Their failures and their triumphs are going to be completely different, and their goals and their failures are going to be completely different next to anybody else. And for me, most people don't understand that with my disability, it's clear. I'm in a wheelchair. Obviously, my legs don't function properly, but I have full sensation in my lower legs, but I'm often classified as, "Oh, I'm sorry you can't feel your legs." Well, I can. And then most people don't realize that I only have 2 fingers on my left hand that actually work. So now, just like Chris Cook, who has no limbs, is it better to have no limbs and have a clear classification of where you're going to go, or somebody like me who had to compete in a system of, where the hell do we put you, right? And that was the big thing. For track, they had no idea where they were going to put me. For basketball, I often would go from one class to another. Hockey, they just loved me because I was so big. They put me in the net and nobody could get the puck by me. Same with rugby. And then with curling, I was just a big powerhouse, right? I could just throw the rock, 100 miles an hour and just clear everything out.
Yeah.
And then I developed that technique for being able to throw gently, and that brought out the softer side in me.
And I think I heard you say, was curling your favorite? Is that the one?
No, actually, my actual favorite sport of all time is wheelchair rugby.
Really?
Oh, yeah, you got to love that sport, man. The only sport where you have to bring your own welding equipment to the Olympics. It's awesome. And when I was fortunate in 2000, I only had about 6 months training in wheelchair rugby to go. And I remember the first day I showed up, I've got the chair. Hi, guys, I'm ready to play. Just one little problem. How the hell do you play this game? The coach walks up to me and he looks at me and he goes, "Holy, okay, boy. You got to remember, I'm 364 pounds at that time. Just massive. The chair is 45 pounds. So I'm over 400 pounds and I could get the chair going about 25K an hour going up the court." And he goes, "I'm going to teach you how to play this game in the simplest form that anybody will understand. See the ball? Yep. Go that way. Once you cross the line, put the ball back down. If somebody has the ball, get it. And that's how I was taught. And I was so big and so fast, nobody could stop me at the time. The first guy I hit was this poor German player in the first opening round of the Sydney Games. And I hit him so hard, I put him in the third row of the spectator seats. And they're like, I don't know if you can play this game, man. You're going to kill somebody. And the most disappointing moment of my athletic career also comes from those games. And that's where I was frowned upon by other wheelchair athletes because they didn't understand my disability. A lot of people had known me for being a track athlete, being a really good basketball athlete. How could I possibly be interjected into this sport called wheelchair rugby? And I met all the classification. I was tested right up to the bronze medal game, and that was actually supposed to have stopped prior, after all the qualification games were done, and they kept doing it. And it's because everybody was like, how? How does this guy possibly fit in? And that was a really depressing time for me. I mean, I was huge in that sport, and I don't mean big. I mean, really, I had a following. Like, the people called me the Beast because I was just a beast out there. And it was the unacceptance of my own athletes inside sport that I held so high was the most depressing and most discouraging moment in sport that I ever experienced.
Yeah, that's I can't say I have ever experienced something like that, so I'm trying to wrap my head around how it would feel. You experienced the best and the worst moments of your career in the same games. I try and think about, like, was there a moment during that time or throughout your career that was like, why am I doing this? Questioning why you continued to pursue this excellence?
I don't think I ever had that. I can tell you the greatest moment in a few minutes if you want of sport, and a lot of people are going to go, yeah, it's about winning the gold in Torino. Well, it's not. The hardest thing for me was not winning the gold, period. And then when I left, I was in a car accident, and that's what actually transferred me into wheelchair curling. A guy cut me off in my truck, and I rolled my truck, and I tore all the muscle off my spinal column, so I couldn't do impact sport anymore. And that's what stopped me from playing rugby. But I had to really think after that, did I want to be an athlete anymore? And, I hate giving this guy credit, but Rocky Balboa and Sylvester Stallone has really come up with some pinnacle lines if you ever watch that stuff. And in Balboa, he goes, there's a beast inside. And I had a beast inside me. I still do to this day to a degree, but I'm not 20 anymore. So that beast just gets to go sleep for a while.
You're directing it another way.
Yeah. So the greatest pinnacle moment in sport for me was in our semifinal game in Torino. We were playing Norway, and I had the shot. I had to make the shot or we were done. We were just done. So wheelchair curling was so new. Nobody knew you could do certain shots, right? A draw, impossible. A raise, takeout, impossible. And I hit the stone, and I put our stone in behind cover, and I threw my hands up and went, yes. And everybody was like, yeah, that was a really good shot. But what I don't tell anybody is why I was going yes. And it was the first time in my career I knew 100% unequivocally I was going home with Olympic medal the next day, right? And I didn't care if it was gold. I didn't care if it was silver. I was finally in my freaking career going home with a medal. And I love being able to tell that sport, it's not about gold and silver. It's about accomplishment, right? Did you finally do your personal best?
I think that's been lost recently. I think you can probably attest to that with that smile. People get so caught up in being the best, becoming the Connor McDavid or the Sidney Crosby or whatever, insert name to the best in their ever sport. And I think, like you said, having those accomplishments, building momentum is what's required to get to that level. So, but you can't put the carriage in front of the horse. For you, your favorite, I actually have to ask, you said Sylvester Stallone. I also read that your hero's Bill Murray.
Yeah. I love Bill Murray. Because as Bill got older, he just didn't give two hoots about what he said or what he did, right?
Yeah.
And the most famous quote that I take from Bill Murray, and I really hold to heart, is from a movie called Meatballs, which kind of sums up my life, by the way, ironically. But it's where he's in the lodge and he's talking to them about, the Olympiad. And he starts saying, and, they have trainers and physiotherapists, and these are a bunch of kids at summer camp, right? And he goes, but it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. And that quote goes on and on and on, and everybody gets wound up, and right? And all it was him saying, I don't care what you do tomorrow. I don't care how you do it. It's the fact that you're doing it, and it really, what the outcome is the next day doesn't matter. Now, we all know that in modern sports, well, that's just not true, right? And I had another really good friend of mine, George Carey's, silver medalist from Nagano in curling. One day he goes, look, you've accomplished something. And I went, yeah, I've got lots of accomplishments. He goes, no, you're in a record book and not in the way that you think. I went, well, what is that, George? And he goes, look, you're a gold medalist. You're going to be remembered forever, right? Tell me how many people are going to remember who won silver at that game, right? They'll tell you who won bronze, but do you honestly ever win silver? You never do. You're given silver, you win bronze. And he said, you can win 150,000 world championships and you're a great athlete, but you win one gold medal and you're going to be remembered forever. And the problem is that, not to be degradatory or anything, like the satisfaction that I have, if you know the story after us winning that gold in regards to Frank Duffy, is even bigger, the accomplishment. And in the long and the short of it is that unfortunately Frank had been faking his disability for years. And he was charged on a different bunch of levels. I'm sure you did your research a little bit. And unfortunately, he couldn't handle it. And before it all broke, Frank committed suicide. And, his teammates were in shock. We were all in shock that somebody that I admired, and I still admire Frank to a degree today, would do something just for the sake of having it, He hadn't been able to, and he found a way to get what would fulfill him. And unfortunately, it was at the risk of, somebody else with a real disability, if we want to call it that could have had that spot.
It brings up an interesting topic, a hot topic in sports nowadays, especially with genders. I like to at least have somewhat of an opinion or share other people's opinions. You, having been in sport for a number of years, have seen, and like from a scientific level, the differences between males and females competing in sport. Can you share your thoughts on this? What's going on? NCAA, World, WADA. As a former doping control chaperone, I also can attest to having all of the testing stuff. So I want to give this a space for you to share your thoughts, because I think it's important for every single athlete and individual.
Sure. So part of what I do for an actual living for the organization that I do is I actually look at equity, diversity, and inclusion. That's part of what I do. The other part is I actually look at LGBTQ and transgender integration into the organization that I am. And the organization that I work for has to look really, really closely at transgender. And the answer at the end of the day, and I'm not being controversial here, and whoever wants to be a hater, be a hater. I'm okay with that. It won't be the first time. But it's the biomechanical difference. How you want to live your life really is up to you. I don't care. I'll support it. I mean, my daughter is non-binary. I have a son, now daughter, that's transgender. And I'm all supportive for it. But the realism is in sport, a male transgendering to female sport biomechanically has differences. Bone structure is different, muscle structure is different. And yes, you can compensate chemically to a certain degree, but in certain sports, that still provides an advantage. And in the reverse, if you have a female transgendering to a male, you have biomechanical differences, and nobody can change that. And it's not that I'm against, well, I was born the wrong sex. Okay, that's your choice, your decision, and I will support you. But when you get into certain sports, and i.e., let's take the most controversial one humanly possible, weightlifting, okay? If you have a male that transgenders to female that then wants to become an athlete inside weightlifting, your bone density and your muscle density is different. We cannot change that. That is just the nature of science, biomechanically, right? There are three ways you are born. You're either born a male, you're born a female, or a l'autre, the other, whether that's missing a part, have an extra part, whether you have both parts, it doesn't matter. It's just the fact is that biomechanically, regardless of what you are or what you choose to be, is better. And I support, like I'll emphasize, please don't, write me a million hate letters here. There are differences, and it has to be taken into consideration in sport. It has to.
I only ask because we're here to educate, entertain, and inspire that next generation. You've already inspired. We've just educated, and we're going to continue to tell some stories that hopefully keep entertaining people. One of your stories that you talked about prior to recording was around testing and some apple juice. Because I've worked as a chaperone alongside Rachel Corbett from Brock University when she was there when she was working as a doping control officer. I'd love for you to share that story because it's not something people would typically get to see or witness.
Okay, so I started athletics when I was really, really young. And I'm not going to tell you how old I was when I pulled this one. But I had not been familiar with doping control. And doping control back then is way different than now. I mean, it's clear nowadays, you pee in a cup and somebody watches you pee in a cup, which is awkward. Right? Hey, how you doing?
I just met you.
I'm here to look at you while you pee. Okay, let's go on, right? And in regards to wheelchair sport, I mean, let's be honest, it can't be out of your leg bag. It has to be fresh catheterization if you can't urinate on your own, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I explained all my function is normal, so I just had to pee. So back in the 80s, let's put it, I was at an event and I got drug tested. So being this young whippersnapper that I was, it was quite a hot location and I couldn't pee. I was dehydrated. And I went in and I tried to pee and I tried to pee and I tried to pee and I came out and I said, it's not going to happen. Well, you can't leave until you pee. Okay, you got something I can drink. And I got handed apple juice. So I go back into the little stall and I drink about half the apple juice and I couldn't pee and I couldn't pee and I couldn't pee. And I said, A, B, cup, yellow looking fluid. I poured the fluid into the cup. I shook it up and out I went. And I said, okay, well, the worst that's going to happen is in about 3 or 4 days when test B needs to be done, I'm going to have to do it again. And this poor nurse, God love her, sorry about that. She looks at it and she goes, oh, that's pretty dark. And I grab it and I went, yep. Opened it up and I poured it down my throat. So this woman just passes out on the floor. Oh my God, he drank his own urine, and everyone else is just howling. And, you know, these are some of the fun stories, you know. Another great one that I'll tell you is the time I got pulled over on the Texas interstate.
Okay.
A little bit older, drinking age, older, let's put it that way. A bunch of us were done sort of competing, and we went down to the local bar. And we stayed in the bar far beyond what the coaches would like us to stay. So there's about 15 of us in wheelchairs coming out of this bar at 2 a.m. You think you can get an accessible cab on a normal hour? Well, try 2 a.m. You can't get it. So we come up with this bright idea. Residence is only a mile away.
Convoy.
There's only one way to get there. So 15 of us hop on the Texas interstate at 2 a.m. The next thing, you know, we're wheeling down there. How you doing? We're a little bit happy. Whoop, whoop. The lights come on. And there's a few dozen state troopers surrounding these 15 Canadian wheelchair athletes who shall remain nameless other than myself. Boys, what are you doing out here? And just trying to get back, right? You guys been drinking tonight? Might have had one or two. And I can't make this stuff up. This is the conversation. Well, do we charge them with drinking and wheeling? I don't know. How do you do a sobriety test? Do you ask them to step out of the wheelchair and walk the white line? Stand on one foot? What do we do? I don't know. Why don't we just pretend like it never happened? Well, we can't leave them on the interstate. Okay, let's escort them back. So we had 2 Texas interstate guys in front, 4 down the side, and 2 behind. As 15 Canadian guys wheel back to the residency. There was a little knock on my door the next day from the coach saying, "Were you part of that?" No, sir, I wasn't.
That was the other Canadian team. That's awesome. I was going to ask how your time at University of Tennessee, Knoxville was, but I feel like you had Texas figured out at that point.
Oh, the worst thing that I almost got kicked out of school once for doing, and this is another true story, is I put a marine boat tow rope out the back of a car and went around a few parking lots in my wheelchair. And that was fun. Needless to say, I think somewhere in Tennessee legislation it says wheelchairs shall not be towed through parking lots now.
You're setting world records and making rules up all across North America.
Oh, the stories I could tell you, man, are they're great because we were allowed to get away with them.
Mm-hmm.
And now, you know, it's part of what I see in sport that's changing is that, you know, sport for me has always been a competitive thing. I'm a competitive guy. I don't even like to lose at Monopoly, right? But there was always fun in it. And creative fun is what I call it. You know, I've scuba dived, and one time I had a whole bunch of people turn to me and go, "Oh, there's no way you can scuba dive. How do you scuba dive?" With a scuba tank. You know, that's how I would answer it. So we went down, we took an old wheelchair, put it in the bottom of Lake Huron. I sat in a wheelchair and my guys took pictures of me going, "Look, we're scuba diving," right? It's a total fake shot, but for some people, for them to see that image is the only way they can process it. And now it's like, oh, that's photoshopped or something. Well, no, we were doing that now and doing it back then. And now guys are just out there scuba diving and, you know, bungee jumping. You know, you see the videos all the time. I'm never doing that one again. Thanks. But, you know, yeah, I was really, really fortunate. Almost got arrested in East Germany once as well.
Hear that story?
Yeah, sure. We were in Germany and, really young kid, and again, Canadian team members, which shall remain nameless to protect the innocent, but you know who you are. We didn't know politics back then. We didn't care about politics. And we wheeled from West Germany into East Germany, approximately 22 feet. That was it. And when we got to the other side, we were stopped by the KGB, the East German police, and they were like, no, you can't be out on the streets. And we're like, what do you mean we can't be on them? Can we take a picture? Blah, blah, blah. And they were in such a tithy, it's not funny. And these guys were like, you can't be out here. Like, this is not acceptable in society at that time. And if it wasn't for 2 U.S. Marines that came across and got us and took us back, we'd probably still be in East Germany today.
Whoa.
Right?
Was there having traveled all across the world for sport, was there a place that you loved competing the most?
No, it's not the most. Every place I competed had a story, had an incident, and had a memory. And I've been blessed to be able to not just streamline down one set of sports. I got to experience sports at multiple different levels, right? You go to China, see the Great Wall, fantastic. Go to Australia and see, the Opera House, right? Another really great story that you'll love, and this one's absolutely hilarious. Have you ever been to the Czech Republic?
I have not.
Okay. So in downtown Prague, and I cannot pronounce it, so you can all write in and just correct me. All right. It's Wenceslas Square.
Okay.
Okay. So in Wenceslas Square, I'm just going to call it the square from now on. It's divided into sections. So you bump up a curb, you go across, you bump down, you cross a road, you bump up. So I was there with a coach and her husband, and I was like, oh, I'm leaving tomorrow. I got to get downtown. And I always tried to see something of the place that I was in, because there's this falsism that people believe when you go to these countries, you get to see the country. Well, you don't. You get to see the airport, the stadium, the residence, the airport, and you're out of the country. So we were going down there, and it had just rained, and I had my really slick curling pants on, right? And the whole square is just crowded, like hundreds of people. So we're bumping up the curb and bumping down the curb, and oh, look, this is great. And I'm not paying attention. And I whacked the front of this curb. I just hit it. Well, I'm in slick pants, so I go sliding out of the wheelchair. The wheelchair goes back. The doctor, who knew me for years, is on the floor howling. And the husband is going, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And I look over, and there's this little kid that comes out of the crowd and goes, I'll give you 8.1 on the landing. And the father reaches out, and it's like the hook. Oh my God. I'm so sorry, sir. No. It was funny. Here's a Canada pin and jacket and all of that. And he goes, I still give you 8.1. I thought the father was just going to murder the poor child. But that was one of those stories where, the innocence of youth, not having these predetermined theories of what is acceptable in regards to a person with a disability. If I had fallen and I smashed my face or something, I'm sure the entire thing would have gone. But I hadn't realized that when I slid out, I had thrown my hands up in the air to protect my hands, so it looked like I had landed in gymnastics. And there's a great picture of that. So
that's amazing. I love hearing stories like this, because I feel like we could sit here all day and chat about them. One of the things you brought up before we started recording was the loss of knowledge in athletes nowadays with new sport compared to the knowledge that or maybe a lack of transfer of knowledge would be a better way to describe that. How do we eliminate that? Because one of the things I'm trying to do with this is, I sat at 15, 16, 17 wishing that I could hear conversations like this from incredible athletes who have accomplished amazing things to reverse engineer how they got there so I could do it. And that's kind of my mission with this podcast, is to be able to help young athletes reverse engineer what they want to accomplish by listening to these stories. What knowledge would you transfer if you could share with that next generation? We normally ask our guests to give their biggest piece of advice, but it was kind of fitting when you said that knowledge transfer wasn't happening. And I thought maybe we'll wrap things up with that today.
Yeah, I think the greatest piece of knowledge transfer is lost is in regards to team sports a lot. And too often the focus is on an individual superstar, right? But everybody often forgets that superstar is supported by a series of other superstars. And it's their stories that you don't hear. Wayne Gretzky is one of those guys that are going to sit there and say, I was a great player, but I couldn't get anywhere without the rest of my team. Michael Jordan, another guy, says, I was a great player, probably the greatest basketball player to ever live, and will ever live. But he attributes, Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman to his success because it was those guys that were the backbone. So what's happening now is that with social stigmas, right, and social hype in regards to a superstar, we often see the centralization of that superstar and not the remaining knowledge of how that person interacts. These guys are great athletes, and I'm not taking anything away from them. But one of the greatest things that was given to me by some of the greatest wheelchair athletes that ever lived, Andre Vigé, Marc Quessier, Mel Fitzgerald, these were the guys. Somebody else we may know, Rick Hansen. Well, I competed with Rick before Rick was Rick, right? And these guys passed down this knowledge of, stroke this way or stroke that way. If you're drafting, this is how you get in and out of a draft, or, basketball players. Like, I would love to do this comparison, put Michael Jordan and a guy named Pat Anderson on the court at the same time in an equal field. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to say, I think Pat might win, right? Pat is just that talented. It's the loss of the ability to tap in to the experience and the knowledge. And now it's all about technology, and particularly in wheelchair sport. And it's great that we're advancing that way. I mean, it's fantastic, right? And nobody can do that. But let's take a look at a reality here, okay? Andre Vigé, look that name up, was probably one of Canada's, if not, let's go Rick Hansen. Great marathoner, right? Andre and Rick dominated for years, 84. First time wheelchair sports got main showcase in LA. Yes, I am that old.
The Hamburger Games, right?
Yeah, the Hamburger Games, yeah. These guys out there, so much knowledge. And nowadays, they're doing 1,500 meters in like 4 minutes, right? And now you've got a guy like Marcel Hugh, which is a great athlete. It's like minute 5 or something. Yes, I'm exaggerating, but I just saw that he broke the world record for the 5,000 meters in 9 minutes and 14 seconds. Well, I'm sorry, that's not normal human, ability. It's just not. Mm-hmm. Doing a marathon, 26 miles, 365 yards in an hour and 9 minutes is not normal. Mm-hmm. You run faster than a cheetah for 26 miles. How do you do that? Well, unfortunately, and let's just be black and white here, and it's technology, and it's fantastic, right? But, put Usain Bolt up against, one of our sprinters now, and you know what? There's not that much difference. And it's the spring leafs of the prosthetic legs that draws that closer, right? If you go back to where I started, where we were wheeling around in the old hospital chairs, boogieing down the track, and 100 meters in 2 minutes and 8 seconds, right? And you're lucky if your wheel wasn't fluttering and all of that. And now you go to turn a corner and you blow on something, you're around the corner. I mean, technology will give you great strides forward, but it also takes away history. And, if we don't have the history and people don't remember how we got there in the first place, that is the shame of what's occurring in society today. Most, I'll go with myself for a minute. I've had a great athletic experience. I've had a great life. I've been fortunate to play, every sport out there. But honestly, how many people know that? Right? A couple guys that curl, a couple guys that competed, but do they realize that in 1986 that I dominated wheelchair track and was the fastest wheelchair athlete in the world for a year and a half? Probably not.
Hopefully they will now because of this. That's why we're here, right? Honestly, I do want to sincerely thank you for your time here, because that's one of the things I wanted to do. I came across your LinkedIn page. I'm like, here's arguably Canada's most decorated athlete ever, and he probably will stay that way. Realistically, to your point, those world records might change and those times are continue to get smaller, but I don't see anyone competing in both summer and winter Paralympic Games, competing in multiple decades, winning 1,000+ medals for Canada. It's probably not happening ever again. So I do want to thank you for your time, Chris. It's been amazing to be able to sit down with you for the past hour, pick your brain. I'm sure I could sit here for another 12. I'm sure there'll be many more conversations. I do want to thank you. I want to give you an opportunity to share anything else that you want with our audience. And I want to preface this by saying this is going to see a heck of a lot more than 6 people that curl or that, might not know who Chris Daw is, but they will after this conversation. And I want to make sure this is another opportunity to share anything, because you've experienced a crazy career and I can't even imagine everything you've seen. But I know there's also moments where you want to take an opportunity to just take the mic and speak it. So if there's anything else, I want to give you the floor.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think the greatest thing to remember is that every athlete today got there because an athlete in whatever sport they did laid the groundwork for you to get there. And whether that's the highs or the lows, the knowledge or the lack thereof, somebody has a history. Tap into that history. Do not let that history die. And I cannot go back enough and say, the 2 major phrases that I grew to live by. Never let your passion outweigh your patience. And remember, it's not what you do, it's what you leave behind. And it doesn't matter who recognizes what you left behind. It's about the fact that you left a legacy somewhere along the way.
And I think that's the best way to describe what you've done, because no matter what, you're going to be there. And I really appreciate your time, and so many Canadians appreciate the work that you've done. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, thank you folks so much for tuning into the 178th episode of the Athletes Podcast. Curious, did you know who Chris Daw was before this show? I came across his profile on LinkedIn and basically realized that this is one of Canada's greatest athletes, if not one of the world's greatest athletes. If you don't have an admiration for what Chris was able to accomplish over his career, I don't know what's going to impress you, because frankly, 1,000+ medals does it for me. That's greatness encapsulated into 45 minutes, an hour-long conversation. I really appreciate you folks tuning in, listening to this entire conversation, wherever you're consuming the Athletes Podcast content. Our team sincerely appreciates it, and we can't wait to continue to be able to do this on a weekly basis. My name's David Stark. I'm your host for the show. Phoenix Wayland is our producer and editor, and Jordan Maslin is our website and app developer. Don't forget, Rooted is our sponsor, and you can use the code AP20 to get 20% off each and every one of their products, whether it's men's, women's, or prenatal products. And check the rest of our website links out online to see what other discounts you can get thanks to the Athletes Podcast. We can't wait to see you next week. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Talk soon. Bye for now.